Good afternoon, everyone. It's October 9th, 2019, and this is sort of a hybrid posting both a reading from this wonderfully written book, Bridge of Sighs by Richard Russo, which is very, once again, synchronistic with the events of my life, and it's also a bit of the torture report. And so before I get to reading the passage that I just read up to a few minutes ago, I just want you to know that for the past few months, I've been telling these gang members that are assaulting me almost nonstop, day and night, with horrifically painful, highly toxic electrochemical weapons, trying to enslave me into their trafficking ring and make me their remotely viewed prostitute, that it's never going to happen. And as they seek to destroy me, I will continue to never capitulate, never jump into their whaling boat. I am their Moby Dick. And as they pursue this course of action, I will drag them down into the Stygian depths with me. And it seems that I am at a point where this is taking place. I'm hearing below my floor in the underground rooms that they've run out of money, they're destitute, they're desperate, they're cold. One of the ringleaders keeps being referred to as skeletal and like a scarecrow, and so they're still assaulting me as if they might be getting some black market contraband, maybe from the Illuminati or white supremacists. So I'm going to have to keep being strong. But in the meantime, I just read up to, let me turn to the pages now, page 510 through 512. And so I'm just going to be reading you the latest synchronicity. And the background here is there's this small town called Thomaston that's sort of an imaginary upstate New York town that it's a little bit like Mayberry RFD, but with, or maybe it's Peyton Place, a hybrid of that, because there's the innocent sweetness of the doings on the surface, and then there's all the internecine complexity of the families that live in this town. And so these boys who didn't think they were particularly stellar students somehow ended up in this honors English class with this very eccentric teacher. And they're just starting their new term as I begin to read. As luck would have it, the first book of the winter term was Moby Dick, period. They were to read the first half of the book over the holidays, but in the first class it immediately became clear that very few had even begun the novel, period. While Mr. Berg normally wouldn't tolerate a flagging discussion, the first Monday back he seemed more distracted than incensed, period. Oh, I don't have to say period because I'm not dictating. Okay. While Mr. Berg normally wouldn't tolerate a flagging discussion, that first Monday back he seemed more distracted than incensed. The next day, when they arrived at the classroom, there was no sign of him. Usually he and Threemock were already there, the record player set up, and Monk or Miles or Lewis scratching away, Mr. Berg standing with his feet set wide apart and snapping his fingers to the beat, grinning his yellow grin. Only when they were all present and in the proper mood for unconventional learning would he turn the volume down. That day, though, even Threemock and the record player were missing. In the center of the room, a narrow, rickety stage had been erected, and the desks were all pushed back against the wall. They just about concluded that the classroom had been commandeered for some other purpose when they heard a clomping sound out in the hallway, some distance off, but steadily drawing nearer. When Noonan looked over at Lucy, he was grinning at him as if the most wonderful thing had just occurred to him. Mr. Berg's only friend on the faculty was Mr. Davis, the industrial arts teacher, who was thought by most to be mildly retarded, which may have been why Mr. Berg so enjoyed publicly proclaiming him the second smartest instructor at Thomaston High. Though he never identified the smartest one, everyone could guess who he meant, and his high opinion of Mr. Davis, people said, wasn't so much a compliment to the shop teacher as an insult to everybody else. What Mr. Davis had fashioned for Mr. Berg today was a short-length 2x4 attached with adjustable sandal-like straps to his scuffed brown shoe and then fastened tight. Noonan and Lucy had realized in the same moment that it wasn't Mr. Berg clomping towards them down the corridor, but Mad Ahab himself. Knowing Mr. Berg's fondness for theatricality, Noonan was surprised not to see full sea captain regalia when he flung the classroom door open and entered with 3 mock in attendance. But except for the block of wood attached to his shoe, he was dressed as usual in dark slacks, dusted liberally with cigarette ash, and a short-sleeved white shirt, its neck stained yellow. With difficulty, he mounted the stage. Mr. Davis's awkward apparatus apparently meant to suggest Ahab's whalebone prosthesis. 3 mock, his black pip, Noonan supposed, lent a hand until no longer needed. He retreated to the far corner of the stage. Mr. Berg stood still for a moment, his back to the class. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded as if it were traveling up from a dark, deep cave. "All visible objects are but as pasteboard masks," he said, then fell silent. "Mr. Berg?" Perry Kozlowski said, and was ignored. "Some unknown but reasoning thing puts forth the molding of its features from behind the unreasoning mask. If man will strike..." And with this, the block of wood came down on the feeble stage to thunderous effect. Everyone jolted upright. Noonan glanced over at Nan, who happened to be sitting closest to the door, and she looked ready to bolt. Now Mr. Berg pivoted painfully, looking very much like a man whose leg had been shorn from his body, his face contorted, positively aglow with madness. "Strike through the mask," he said, shaking his fist at them so violently that he lost his balance and nearly fell. "How can the prisoner reach outside except by thrusting through the wall?" The question was clearly rhetorical, but Perry raised his hand. "Mr. Berg?" Good God, Noonan thought. Did Perry really think he was going to forestall his dramatic performance in order to answer some stupid question like, "Will this be on the test?" Focusing on Perry as he would a mutinous seaman, Mr. Berg clumped over to the edge of the stage and glared down on him with such a murderous expression that Perry actually leaned back in his chair. Ahab's voice became low, conspiratorial. "To me," he confided, "the white whale is the wall. Sometimes I think there's naught beyond." Perry didn't look like this possibility troubled him greatly, though everything else about the proceedings did. "But 'tis enough," Mr. Berg continued, straightening now and clomping back down the stage, stopping before each member of the class and inspecting the student as a captain would his crew, assessing character and courage. "He tasks me. He heaps me. I see in him hideous strength, with an insidious malice sinewing it. That inscrutable thing is chiefly what I hate, and be the white whale agent or principal, I will wreak that hate upon him." Bye for now.